The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty military training range as Sarah Martinez adjusted her protective eyewear and checked her equipment one final time. As a civilian contractor responsible for maintaining the shooting facilities at Camp Pendleton, she had performed this routine countless times over the past 2 years. Today was supposed to be just another ordinary Tuesday, clearing spent brass casings and checking targets before the Marines arrived for their weekly marksmanship training. Sarah had grown up on a ranch in Montana, where her father taught her to shoot before she could properly ride a bicycle. Moving to California after college to work for the military had been a natural transition. Her job was simple but important, ensuring the ranges were safe and ready for training exercises. She took pride in her work, knowing that proper range maintenance could mean the difference between life and death for the soldiers who trained there. The early morning air was crisp, carrying the familiar scent of sagebrush and gun oil that had become as comfortable to her as the smell of her mother's kitchen back home. She loaded her small utility vehicle with cleaning supplies, target materials, and her radio equipment. The range stretched out before her like a small valley, with firing positions at various distances marked clearly with white paint on concrete barriers. As she drove slowly along the range, Sarah noticed something unusual: fresh tire tracks in the dirt, too recent to be from yesterday's training session. She stopped the vehicle and climbed out, kneeling to examine the marks more closely. The tread pattern was different from the standard military vehicles she was accustomed to seeing. Her father had taught her to read signs in the wilderness, and years of working around military equipment had sharpened those skills. A slight uneasiness crept into her thoughts, but she pushed it aside. Probably just maintenance crews who had worked late the previous evening. She continued her routine, methodically working her way down the range, collecting brass casings in large canvas bags, and noting any repairs needed on the target systems. The radio on her belt crackled with morning chatter from the base communications center. Traffic reports, weather updates, routine administrative messages. She half listened while focusing on her work, occasionally responding to direct calls about range status and availability. Everything seemed normal, following the predictable rhythm she had grown accustomed to over the months. At the far end of the range, Sarah began setting up fresh paper targets on the 500-yard line. This was always her favorite part of the morning routine. The targets snapped satisfyingly into place on their frames, creating neat rows of clean white circles against the brown hillside beyond. She took a moment to appreciate the view, looking back toward the main base buildings visible in the distance. That was when she first heard the vehicles approaching from the wrong direction. The sound came from behind the target line, from the restricted area that led into the hills beyond the base perimeter. No authorized vehicles should be coming from that direction, especially not at this hour. Sarah shaded her eyes with her hand and squinted toward the source of the noise, her heart beginning to beat faster as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. 3 dark-colored trucks were moving down a dirt road that was supposed to be blocked off and used. They were traveling fast, kicking up clouds of dust that made it difficult to see details. But even at a distance, something about their movement pattern seemed wrong. They were driving in a tactical formation, maintaining specific distances between vehicles in a way that civilian contractors or lost delivery drivers definitely would not. Sarah reached for her radio, then hesitated. What exactly would she report? Vehicles in an area where vehicles sometimes needed to go for maintenance? She did not want to sound paranoid or trigger an unnecessary emergency response over what might be a completely legitimate activity she simply had not been informed about. But her instincts, honed by years of living in remote areas where paying attention to unusual sounds and movements was a matter of survival, were screaming that something was very wrong. The vehicles were now close enough that she could see they were not standard military issue. The paint jobs were wrong, and the configurations looked more like civilian trucks that had been modified for rough terrain use. She made her decision and keyed her radio. Base communications, this is Range Control 7. I have 3 unidentified vehicles approaching from the restricted area beyond target line 5. Request confirmation of any authorized activity in that sector. The response was immediate and alarmed. Range Control 7, negative on any authorized activity in that area. Can you provide description and current location of these vehicles? Sarah's mouth went dry. Roger, base communications. Three dark-colored trucks, possibly modified civilian vehicles, moving in tactical formation approximately half a mile from target line 5 and closing. They are definitely not authorized to be in this area. Range Control 7. Evacuate the range immediately and return to base. We are dispatching security teams to your location. But even as the words came through her radio, Sarah realized the vehicles had changed direction and were now heading straight for her position. They were moving much faster now, and she could hear the engines straining as the drivers pushed their vehicles hard across the rough terrain. Her utility vehicle was designed for slow, careful work around the range, not for high-speed escape across open ground. She jumped into her vehicle and started the engine, her hands shaking slightly as she shifted into gear. The main road back to base was a good mile away, and these trucks would easily catch her before she could reach safety. Her mind raced through options, trying to remember the layout of the range and any possible cover or concealment she could reach. The radio exploded with chatter as the base communications center began coordinating an emergency response. She could hear multiple units being dispatched, but knew it would take time for them to reach her location. Time she probably did not have. As she drove as fast as her vehicle would allow toward the nearest concrete barrier that might provide some protection, Sarah caught her first clear look at the occupants of the approaching trucks. Men in military-style clothing, but not the standard uniforms of any branch she recognized. They were carrying weapons, and their movements as they prepared to dismount from their vehicles had the practiced efficiency of trained soldiers. But they were not American soldiers. She reached the concrete barrier and abandoned her vehicle, grabbing her radio and sprinting toward the largest structure that might provide cover. Behind her, she could hear the trucks screeching to a halt and doors slamming as men shouted to each other in a language she did not recognize. The morning that had started so peacefully with routine range maintenance had suddenly become something entirely different. Sarah pressed her back against the concrete barrier and tried to control her breathing as she keyed her radio one more time. Base communications, this is Range Control 7. I am taking cover at barrier position 12. Multiple armed individuals have dismounted from vehicles and are advancing on my position. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. The response came immediately, but the words seemed to come from very far away as Sarah heard the first sounds of weapons being ready just beyond her hiding place. Range Control 7, hold your position. Help is on the way. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of her father's ranch in Montana and wondering if she would ever see it again. Then, she opened her eyes, checked her radio one more time, and prepared to do whatever was necessary to survive until help could arrive. The sound of boots on gravel was getting closer. The first gunshot shattered the morning silence like thunder, sending concrete chips flying from the barrier just inches from Sarah's head. She pressed herself lower against the structure, her heart hammering as she realized these men were not here to capture her. They were shooting to kill. The radio in her hand crackled with increasingly urgent communications from the base, but the voices seemed distant and unreal compared to the immediate terror of bullets striking concrete around her. More shots followed in rapid succession, and Sarah could hear the distinctive crack of rifle rounds passing overhead. Her father had taught her to recognize different types of gunfire during hunting season, but this was unlike anything she had experienced. These were military weapons being fired by people who knew how to use them, and they were methodically trying to eliminate any witnesses to whatever operation they were conducting. She keyed her radio with trembling fingers. Base communications, I am under direct fire. Multiple shooters with automatic weapons. I need immediate assistance. The response was filled with static, but she could make out enough words to understand that help was coming. The question was whether it would arrive in time. From her position behind the concrete barrier, she could hear the men spreading out, their voices carrying on the morning air as they coordinated their movements. Even though she could not understand their language, their tactical communications were clear enough in intent. Sarah tried to remember everything she knew about the layout of the range. The concrete barriers were designed to stop bullets, but they were spaced apart with gaps that would expose her if she tried to move between them. The main road to safety was across open ground that would leave her completely vulnerable. Her only hope was to find better cover and wait for the cavalry to arrive. Another burst of gunfire struck the barrier, sending more concrete fragments raining down on her head. The shooters were getting closer, and she could hear them moving to flank her position. In a few more minutes, they would have angles that would make her current hiding spot useless. Then, she heard something that made her blood run cold, the sound of vehicles approaching from a completely different direction. For a moment, hope flared in her chest as she thought reinforcements had arrived much faster than expected. But, as the engine noise grew louder, she realized these were different vehicles, and they were coming from the direction of the base. The radio chatter suddenly became much more intense, with multiple voices overlapping as various units reported contact with hostile forces. Sarah began to understand that what was happening to her was not an isolated incident. This was a coordinated attack on multiple locations around the base perimeter. A new voice came through her radio, calm and professional despite the chaos erupting around the base. Range Control 7, this is SEAL Team 4. We are approximately 2 minutes from your location. Can you identify your exact position? Sarah had never heard a more beautiful sound than that steady, confident voice. SEAL Team 4, I am behind concrete barrier 12 on the 500-yard line. Multiple hostiles with automatic weapons are advancing on my position from the south and east. Roger, Range Control 7. Stay down and stay put. We are coming to get you. The gunfire around her position intensified, and Sarah realized the attackers had spotted the approaching SEAL team. What had been a methodical hunt for a single witness had suddenly become a full-scale firefight between professional soldiers. The sounds of battle erupted across the range as automatic weapons fire echoed off the concrete barriers and hillsides. Sarah pressed herself as flat as possible against the ground as bullets began flying in both directions over her head. The concrete barrier that had been protecting her from one direction was now in the middle of a crossfire, and she could hear rounds striking both sides of the structure. Pieces of concrete and metal began raining down as the barrier took hit after hit from multiple directions. Through the chaos of gunfire, she heard the distinctive sound of military vehicles arriving at high speed. Doors slammed, and boots hit the ground as the SEAL team deployed into combat positions. Their movements were different from the attackers, faster, more coordinated, with the practiced efficiency of men who had done this many times before in much more dangerous places than a California training range. The battle was brief, but intense. The SEAL team had superior training, better equipment, and the advantage of knowing the terrain they were fighting on. Within minutes, the volume of return fire from the attackers had diminished significantly. Sarah could hear shouted commands in English as the SEALs advanced and secured the area around her position. Range Control 7, this is Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez. We are coming to your position. Do not move until you hear my voice directly. Sarah acknowledged the transmission and waited, listening to the sounds of combat moving away from her location as the SEAL team pursued the remaining attackers. The gunfire became more sporadic, then stopped altogether except for single shots in the distance as the professionals finished their work. Ma'am, you can come out now. Keep your hands visible and move slowly. Sarah looked up to see a figure in full combat gear approaching her position. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez was a compact man with weathered features and eyes that had seen too much combat, but his voice was gentle as he helped her to her feet. Are you injured, ma'am? Sarah took inventory of herself and was surprised to find that aside from some scrapes from concrete fragments, she was physically unharmed. I think I'm okay. Just shaken up. That's completely understandable. You did good work calling this in when you did. Your early warning gave us time to respond before this became much worse. As Rodriguez spoke, Sarah became aware that the range was filling with military personnel. Additional SEAL teams, Marine security forces, and medical personnel were arriving in a steady stream of vehicles. The efficiency of their response was impressive, but also sobering in its implications about how serious the threat had been. Chief, what was this? Who were those people? Rodriguez's expression darkened. We're still sorting that out, ma'am. But this appears to have been a coordinated reconnaissance mission, possibly preparing for something larger. You stumbled into the middle of a very serious situation. As medical personnel checked her for injuries she had not noticed, Sarah watched the SEALs and Marines securing the area. Bodies were being covered, weapons collected, and evidence carefully documented. The morning sun that had seemed so peaceful a few hours earlier now illuminated a crime scene. "Ma'am," Rodriguez continued, "we're going to need to debrief you extensively about everything you saw and heard this morning. Your observations about the tire tracks and vehicle movements could be critical intelligence." Sarah nodded, still trying to process what had happened. "Chief, there's something else. When I first saw those vehicles, something felt wrong about their movement patterns. They were driving in formation, like they knew exactly where they were going and what they were looking for." Rodriguez's attention sharpened. "What kind of formation? Can you describe it?" "They maintained specific distances between vehicles, like they were following tactical protocols. And when they spotted me, they immediately changed to an attack formation and moved to surround my position. These weren't random criminals or terrorists. They were trained soldiers." "That matches what we observed during the engagement," Rodriguez confirmed. "These people had military training and equipment. The question is who's military and what they were really doing here." As Sarah provided her initial statement to intelligence officers, she overheard radio communications about similar incidents at other locations around the base perimeter. Whatever had happened this morning was much larger than a simple intrusion onto a training range. It was beginning to look like a systematic probe of base defenses, testing response times and capabilities. The implications were disturbing. If hostile forces were conducting reconnaissance operations on American military installations, it suggested planning for something much more serious than what had happened today. Sarah realized that her routine morning of range maintenance had accidentally uncovered what might be the early stages of a major security threat. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said as the debriefing concluded, "I want you to know that your actions this morning probably prevented something much worse from happening. Your early warning and accurate reporting gave us the intelligence we needed to respond effectively." But, as Sarah was escorted away from the range toward base headquarters for more extensive questioning, she could not shake the feeling that what had happened today was only the beginning. The men who had tried to kill her had been too well trained and too well equipped to be acting alone. Someone with significant resources and capabilities was taking an active interest in American military installations. And they would probably be back. 3 days after the range incident, Sarah found herself in a situation she never could have imagined. The extensive debriefings had revealed that the attack was indeed part of a larger operation, and intelligence agencies were scrambling to piece together a threat that extended far beyond Camp Pendleton. What made the situation even more concerning was that similar probes had been detected at military installations across the western United States, suggesting a coordinated campaign by an unknown hostile force. Sarah had been placed in protective custody while investigators worked to determine if she had been specifically targeted or simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The small apartment on base where she was staying felt more like a prison than protection, with armed guards and constant supervision. She was going stir-crazy when Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez appeared at her door with an unexpected proposition. "Ma'am, I know this has been a difficult few days for you," Rodriguez began, his weathered face showing genuine concern. "But we have a situation developing, and, frankly, we could use your help." Sarah looked up from the military reports she had been reading to stay informed about the investigation. "What kind of help?" "I'm just a civilian contractor who maintains shooting ranges." "That's exactly why we need you," Rodriguez explained, taking a seat across from her. "Intelligence believes the people who attacked you were specifically gathering information about our training facilities and capabilities. They want to know how we train our people, what our response times are, and what our defensive positions look like. But surely you have people who know all that better than I do." Rodriguez nodded. "We do. But here's the thing. Our people look like military personnel. They move like military personnel, and they think like military personnel. You, on the other hand, know these facilities from a completely different perspective. You see things we might miss because you're not thinking tactically when you're doing your job." Sarah was beginning to understand where this was leading, and she was not sure she liked it. "Chief, what exactly are you asking me to do?" "We believe there's going to be another probe, probably within the next 48 hours. This time we want to be ready for them, but we also want to learn everything we can about their capabilities and intentions. We need someone who can observe their activities from a civilian perspective and provide intelligence that our tactical teams might not think to gather." "You want me to be bait?" Rodriguez's expression became more serious. Ma'am, I won't lie to you. There would be risks involved. But we would have extensive overwatch, and at the first sign of trouble, we would extract you immediately. The intelligence you could gather might prevent something much worse from happening to a lot of innocent people. Sarah stood up and walked to the small window, looking out at the base activities continuing their normal routine. Soldiers training, vehicles moving, the everyday business of military life proceeding as if the world had not suddenly become a more dangerous place. She thought about her father's ranch in Montana and how he had taught her that sometimes you had to stand up and fight for the things that mattered. What would I need to do? Rodriguez joined her at the window. We want you to return to your normal range maintenance routine, but this time with some modifications. You would be equipped with better communication gear and surveillance equipment. Your job would be to observe and report everything you see, no matter how insignificant it might seem. And if they show up again? That's where it gets interesting, Rodriguez said, his tone becoming more animated. We've been developing new tactics for dealing with these kinds of threats, and we think your unique perspective could be valuable in field testing some of our approaches. Over the next several hours, Rodriguez and his team briefed Sarah on the operation they had planned. It was ambitious and dangerous, but also brilliant in its simplicity. Rather than simply waiting for the attackers to return and then engaging them in another firefight, they wanted to turn the tables and use the enemy's own reconnaissance mission against them. Sarah would return to the range, but this time she would be carrying advanced surveillance equipment disguised as routine maintenance gear. Hidden cameras and listening devices would record everything the attackers did and said. More importantly, Sarah would be able to observe their tactics and procedures from the perspective of their intended target. But, ma'am, Rodriguez emphasized, the most important thing to understand is that you won't be out there alone. We'll have Overwatch teams positioned at multiple locations around the range, and at the first sign of trouble, we'll move in to extract you. What if they don't give you time to extract me? Rodriguez paused, then reached into his equipment bag and pulled out something Sarah had never expected to see in her hands, a military sniper rifle. That's why we're going to teach you to use this. Sarah stared at the weapon. It was a sleek, professional piece of equipment that looked nothing like the hunting rifle she had grown up with on her father's ranch. Chief, I've never used anything like this. Ma'am, you grew up shooting on a ranch, and your file says you were consistently one of the best marksmen in your high school shooting club. This rifle is just a more precise version of what you already know how to do. Rodriguez began breaking down the weapon, explaining its components and capabilities. This is a Remington 700 platform, modified for military use. Effective range of over 800 yards with the right ammunition. The scope is computerized and will help with range finding and wind compensation. As he spoke, Sarah found herself drawn into the technical details. The rifle was indeed more sophisticated than anything she had experience with, but the fundamentals were similar to what her father had taught her years ago. Breath control, trigger squeeze, sight alignment. The basics remain the same regardless of the weapon's complexity. The plan is that you won't need to use this, Rodriguez continued. But if things go wrong and we can't get to you in time, this gives you the ability to defend yourself at ranges where their weapons won't be effective. They spent the rest of the day at a secure training facility, with Rodriguez and other team members teaching Sarah the specifics of the weapon system. She was surprised at how quickly the skills came back to her. Her father had been an excellent teacher, and the foundation he had provided years ago on the Montana ranch served her well with the military equipment. Ma'am, you're a natural at this. One of the instructors observed after Sarah had placed 10 consecutive shots within a 2-inch group at 300 yards. Have you considered a career change? Sarah laughed, but there was truth in the comment. Something about the precision and focus required for long-range shooting felt right to her. It was like meditation in motion, requiring complete concentration and perfect coordination between mind and body. By the end of the training day, Sarah was comfortable with the weapon system and confident in her ability to use it effectively if the situation required. But, more importantly, she had developed a new appreciation for the men and women who put themselves in harm's way to protect others. The SEALs and Marines she was working with were not just soldiers. They were craftsmen who had dedicated their lives to mastering extremely difficult and dangerous skills. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said as they concluded the training session, "I want to be completely honest with you about what we're asking you to do. This operation has risks that we can't completely control. If you have any doubts about participating, now is the time to say so." Sarah considered the question carefully. 3 days ago, she had been a civilian contractor whose biggest concern was ensuring shooting ranges were properly maintained. Now she was being asked to serve as bait in an operation to capture or eliminate unknown hostile forces who had already demonstrated their willingness to kill. But she also thought about the other people who worked on the base, the soldiers who trained on the ranges she maintained, and the families who lived in nearby communities. If these attackers were planning something larger, then someone needed to stop them. And, apparently, she was in a unique position to help make that happen. "Chief, when do we start?" Rodriguez smiled for the first time since she had known him. "Tomorrow morning, ma'am. Same time you normally start your range maintenance routine." As Sarah cleaned and secured the rifle that might soon be her lifeline, she realized that her quiet life as a civilian contractor was officially over. Tomorrow she would find out if the skills her father had taught her on a Montana ranch were sufficient to keep her alive in a very different kind of hunting ground. The pre-dawn darkness felt different this time as Sarah made her way to the range. Every shadow could conceal a threat. Every sound might be the first warning of approaching danger. But instead of the fear that had overwhelmed her during the previous attack, she felt something closer to focused determination. She was no longer a helpless civilian caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was now part of the mission. The rifle Rodriguez had given her was secured in a specially designed case that looked identical to the survey equipment she normally carried. Hidden cameras and listening devices were concealed throughout her maintenance gear, and a tiny transmitter in her collar would allow the Overwatch teams to monitor her location and vital signs in real time. "Range Control 7. This is Overwatch 1, came Rodriguez's voice through the nearly invisible earpiece she wore. "Radio check. Overwatch 1, Range Control 7. I read you 5x5, Sarah responded, using the military terminology she had learned during her briefings. "Roger. Remember, your job is to observe and report. We want to learn everything we can about these people before we take them down." Sarah began her routine maintenance activities, but this time, every action was calculated to provide maximum intelligence-gathering opportunities. The hidden cameras were positioned to record approaches from multiple directions, and her movement patterns were designed to draw potential attackers into predetermined kill zones where the Overwatch teams could engage them most effectively. For the first 2 hours, everything proceeded normally. Sarah cleaned and prepared targets, collected brass casings, and performed routine equipment checks. The radio chatter in her earpiece indicated that surveillance teams around the base perimeter had not detected any unusual activity. She began to wonder if intelligence had been wrong about the timing of the next probe. Then, just as the sun was beginning to rise above the eastern hills, she heard the sound that had haunted her dreams for the past 3 days. Vehicles approaching from the restricted area beyond the target line. "Overwatch 1, I have vehicle sounds from the restricted area. Same approach pattern as the previous attack." "Roger, Range Control 7. We have them on thermal imaging. 3 vehicles, same configuration as before. Continue your routine, and let them get close enough for positive identification." Sarah's hands were surprisingly steady as she continued working with the targets, using her peripheral vision to track the approaching vehicles. This time she was ready for them, and, more importantly, she was not alone. "Overwatch 1, I can see the vehicles now. Same type of trucks, same tactical formation. They're approximately 800 yards out, and closing." "Confirmed. We count 9 individuals total. Range Control 7. Begin moving toward Position Alpha." Position Alpha was a predetermined location that would give Sarah cover while providing clear fields of fire for both her weapon and the Overwatch teams. As she walked casually toward the position, she could hear the vehicle engines getting louder. "Overwatch 1, they've stopped approximately 400 yards out. Personnel are dismounting and beginning to advance on foot." "Roger. Can you make out any details about their equipment or uniforms?" Sarah had the surveillance equipment recording everything, but Rodriguez wanted real-time intelligence for tactical decision-making. She took a careful look at the approaching men, using the scope on her rifle to get a better view. Overwatch 1. I count 6 individuals advancing in a tactical formation. They're carrying what appear to be AK pattern rifles and wearing non-standard military clothing. No visible unit markings or identification. Excellent work. Range control 7. Continue to position Alpha and prepare to engage if necessary. As Sarah reached her predetermined position, she realized that the approaching men had changed their tactics from the previous attack. Instead of rushing her position, they were advancing slowly and methodically, taking careful note of the range layout and defensive positions. They were clearly conducting a detailed reconnaissance mission. Overwatch 1. These guys are different from last time. They're moving like they're mapping the area rather than trying to eliminate a witness. Understood. Stay in position and continue observing. Sarah watched through her rifle scope as the men spread out and began photographing various aspects of the range infrastructure. They were particularly interested in the concrete barriers and their positioning relative to potential avenues of approach. One man appeared to be making detailed notes, while others took measurements. Overwatch 1. They're conducting a detailed survey of defensive positions. This looks like preparation for a much larger operation. That confirms our intelligence assessments. Range control 7. We're going to let them continue for a few more minutes to gather additional intelligence. Then, we'll move to capture rather than eliminate them. But, as Sarah continued to observe the reconnaissance team, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. One of the men had separated from the group and was moving in a wide circle that would bring him to a position behind her cover. He was not participating in the survey work. He was hunting her. Overwatch 1. I have one individual breaking off from the main group and attempting to flank my position. He's approximately 300 yards out and moving to get behind me. Roger, we see him. Overwatch 3 is moving to intercept. But, as Sarah watched the flanking maneuver develop, she realized that the Overwatch team would not be able to reach the flanker before he achieved a firing position that would expose her to deadly accurate rifle fire. The careful planning and preparation were about to be undone by a single tactical variable they had not anticipated. Overwatch 1, your team won't reach him in time. He's going to have a clear shot at my position in about 30 seconds. Range control 7. Begin immediate movement to position Bravo. Position Bravo was a backup location with better cover, but reaching it would require Sarah to cross open ground while under potential enemy observation. As she prepared to move, the flanker suddenly appeared from behind a small ridge, rifle already raised and aimed in her direction. Time seemed to slow down as Sarah made the most important decision of her life. Instead of running for better cover, she dropped into a stable shooting position behind the concrete barrier and brought her rifle to bear on the flanker. Through the computerized scope, she could see his face clearly as he searched for her exact location. Overwatch 1, I have a clear shot on the flanker. Request permission to engage. Range control 7, you are authorized to engage. Take the shot. Sarah's breathing slowed as all her father's training and the recent work with Rodriguez came together in a moment of perfect focus. The rifle felt like an extension of her body as she aligned the crosshairs on the center of the flanker's chest. Wind was minimal, range was approximately 275 yards, and the target was stationary. She squeezed the trigger with steady, even pressure, and the rifle bucked against her shoulder with a sharp crack that echoed across the range. Through the scope, she watched the flanker spin and fall, his weapon flying away as the bullet found its mark. Overwatch 1, target down. 1 round fired, 1 hit confirmed. Outstanding shooting, range control 7. Stand by for mop-up operations. The elimination of their flanker created immediate confusion among the remaining reconnaissance team members. They had not expected to encounter return fire from what they assumed was a helpless civilian target, and their tactical formation began to break down as they tried to locate the source of the shooting. That confusion gave the Overwatch teams the opportunity they needed to close the trap. Sarah watched through her scope as SEAL teams appeared from multiple directions, surrounding the remaining attackers with overwhelming force and superior positioning. Overwatch teams, this is Overwatch 1. You are authorized to capture or eliminate remaining targets. Rules of engagement are weapons free. The battle was over almost before it began. The reconnaissance team found themselves caught in the open with no cover and no escape routes. facing professional soldiers who had been planning this engagement for days. Within minutes, 2 more attackers were dead, and the remaining 3 were secured as prisoners. Range Control 7. This is Overwatch 1. Excellent work. You can stand down now. As Sarah saved her rifle and stood up from her shooting position, she felt a strange mixture of pride and sadness. She had successfully completed her first military mission, but she had also taken a human life for the first time. The training had prepared her for the technical aspects of long-range shooting, but nothing could have prepared her for the emotional impact of using those skills in combat. Rodriguez appeared at her position within minutes, along with other team members who had been providing Overwatch. "Ma'am, that was some of the finest shooting I've seen in 20 years of military service. You may have just prevented a major terrorist attack on this base." As the area was secured and prisoners were taken into custody, intelligence teams began the process of exploiting the intelligence bonanza that Sarah's mission had provided. The detailed recordings of the reconnaissance activities, combined with the equipment and documents recovered from the attackers, painted a clear picture of a sophisticated plot to attack multiple military installations simultaneously. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said as they walked away from the range, "I know this wasn't what you signed up for when you took a job maintaining shooting ranges, but what you accomplished here today probably saved dozens of lives." Sarah looked back at the range where she had spent so many peaceful mornings doing routine maintenance work. That chapter of her life was clearly over, but she was beginning to understand that a new and very different chapter was about to begin. "Chief, what happens now?" Rodriguez smiled. "Now, ma'am, we're going to have a very interesting conversation about your future career opportunities with the Navy." As they drove away from the range, Sarah realized that her father's lessons about reading the wilderness and making difficult shots had prepared her for something she never could have imagined. She had started the morning as a civilian contractor trying to help capture some reconnaissance personnel, and she was ending it as someone who had successfully completed a military mission under fire. The quiet life she had planned was gone, but the life ahead promised to be far more meaningful than anything she had ever considered possible.